welcome to Kuddle Puddle. I'm Abnuja, and today, as you can see, we are shooting outdoors in a glorious weather, a beautiful sunshine, and as you can notice, I'm in high spirits. And today, I'm going to recommend you 7 books that you should definitely read before kicking the bucket. Okay, so let us open the doors to our magnificent world and dive right in. So, these 7 books are the books that everyone should read. This is obviously not an exhaustive list, but as we all know, there are so many books, oceans and oceans of books, and so little time in our hands before we are no longer able to read. So, in this case, I decided to come up with a list of books that you should definitely read no matter what before your time is over. These are the books that, according to me, ought to be read by everyone. So, the first book that I'm going to recommend is called Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. Now, this is a lengthy read and a very intricately written one. Okay, so I admit that reading this book would not be easy because you will be lost in the sheer greatness of it. So, this is a story about Salim, who was born at the stroke of midnight at the exact hour of India's independence. And it is not just a story about one person, it is a story about India, Indians, and how we operated before and after independence, how it affected us, and how all the children who were born at the stroke of midnight on the day of independence are connected with each other. Okay, so this is something that not just Indians but everyone else can enjoy. Okay, now the next novel that I'm going to recommend is 1984 by George Orwell. Now this is, I'll go ahead and say, not a comfortable read. This is a book that is going to make you feel uncomfortable, make you imagine and make you live through a dystopia that may become true in future. Okay, so more than 60 years after this masterpiece has been published, it still remains the most hauntingly terrifying portrayals of the future of humankind. So once you read this, you will realize how the socio-political climate of a country can completely change your life, and how haunting and how terrifying and uncomfortable things can get if they go wrong. Very wrong. This one is something you should not miss. Now, my next recommendation is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Now, we all know Charles Dickens. We might have read Oliver Twist or David Copperfield somewhere in school or somewhere else. But I recommend The Great Expectations because it is widely acknowledged as one of the most impressive works by Dickens. Okay, so this is a first-person narrative of an orphan named Pip, who, even though poor, rose to great respect and wealth on his own merit, and how his story progresses. Okay, now this is a very special book because not many books are written in first-person narrative, but this one is by Dickens, and Dickens is the master of storytelling. So now the fourth book that I'm going to recommend is called 100 Years of Solitude. Now, I've already recommended this book once in my modern classics recommendations, and I cannot recommend this book enough. Okay, now you'll know why I'm talking so highly about this book once you read it. Okay, So, this book is a sinusoidal and kaleidoscopic journey. It is going to make you feel so many things, think about so many things. It has got so many layers, so many different hues that it will blow your mind. So, 100 Years of Solitude is definitely on my list of what you should read before you die. Now, the next book that I'm going to recommend is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, again a classic. Now, the protagonist of this book, Jane Eyre, is a confident, sharp woman who does not seek a man's approval or benevolence to showcase her individuality. She is a force of nature, much like the woman of today. So, no matter if you're a woman or a man, you ought to read this one, because even though it was written back in 1897, the story and the protagonist and the way that it has been written and the various themes that have been discussed in this one are still very, very relevant today, and that is why it's a classic. It's timeless. The next book I'm going to recommend is called Anna Karenina. Now, a quick confession, I still haven't finished reading Anna Karenina because of the sheer length and the reading this book requires a certain amount of will, and that is why I haven't able to finish this one yet. I'm still halfway through, and I promise myself and I promise you that I'll finish this one at least by the end of this year. Anna Karenina is one of Leo Tolstoy's best works. In fact, he considered this his only novel. Okay. Now, the final book that I'm going to recommend you is To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, this one also I've already recommended in another video of mine. You can check that out if you want. So, To Kill a Mockingbird is a story of prejudice, injustice, racism, abuse, and how our society deals with all this. So, this little book is a very strong, very powerful story, and the way it deals with all these social malpractices is something from which we all can learn about. Okay, so this was my final recommendation. So I recommended you 7 must-read books that you ought to read at least once in your lifetime. Okay, now go read them. Let me know how many of them you read, how you found them in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the outdoors with me today. Like this video if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time in another video. Till then, keep smiling, keep reading, and keep exploring. Bye bye.